Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fix My Fees podcast, where we spotlight incredible business owners and leaders across the country. Now, here at Fix My Fees, each episode is designed to highlight the stories, wins, challenges, and lessons learned from entrepreneurs who are building real impact in their industry. I must say, we have taken a little bit of a different change in industries for the podcast that I've done. However, this new industry that I've explored into, you meet a lot of great people, and a lot of great people that are doing a lot of great work. And I'm actually very excited to talk to this individual here. And he actually has the same name as me, spelled a little differently, but the same name, which is a great name. Now, who do I have a pleasure here speaking with?
Oh, Geoff Mason.
Yes, I love
You,
it.
you were doing so good. I just was to let you keep going. I don't know.
Now, Geoffrey, so tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And what's your background?
I always loved science. I loved computer science, actually. I mean, the PC was the most exciting thing when it came out for me. Like, they were super expensive. Not many people had them, but my dad bought one. And then, that was me coding when I was very young. So I did a lot of coding when I was, this is back, very young, sixth grade, seventh grade, things like that. So I'm really into it. But ultimately kind of felt it was very limited. This is pre-internet, pre-everything. I mean, everything's sitting on like a little 5.5 inch top. So there are things to do, but it wasn't nearly as exciting as it is today. So but I grew to love science through that. I mean, I just thought it was just fascinating. My dad's an astrophysicist. I actually don't find that interesting, to be honest. I mean, he tried to interest me a lot, but no, but I mean, the idea of discovering new things, biochemistry is becoming a big deal too. So, when I was off to college, I I had to make a tough decision to give up coding because I was just like, look, it's interesting, but I don't want to make, clippy work for Microsoft. I mean, the biggest apparent careers were inaccessible, and I didn't live in San Francisco, so I wasn't going to be building anything in my garage. So, and being an entrepreneur back then seemed like a totally inaccessible sort of thing. So I'm like, okay, fine. I want a career. I want to do something in science. I looked at biochemistry, but honestly, at Harvard, I mean, the biochemistry grad students, it's the best department in the country, I think, or at least at the time it was. Who knows? But presumably, everything Harvard, right? At least Harvard tells you everything's best. You don't always check, and it's not always true. But whatever. But these guys were panicked. I mean, they were trying to find something in a haystack, and they were all competing with each other, working around the clock. There were no robots. There was no computers involved. It was all manual, and it was just hit and miss. And so I looked at that, and I mean, comparatively to astrophysics was sort of going through some stuff. CERN was being built in Europe. Launch vehicles are being privatized. My father was convinced that was the death of all space science, was that they would never know how to figure it out. They could never do as well as the government. He's a big believer in that. And I'm not as much, but I mean, anyway, but it didn't look rosy. Whereas going and being a patent attorney, which is what I became ultimately, seemed more reasonable. I mean, it was something where other people were taking all the risks on the biochemistry and whatever else, and then they needed help, protecting the invention. So they file for patents and they litigate them. So, went to law school. I really had no idea. I mean, I was basically mostly a science nerd and I studied philosophy as well, just so I learned how to write. So I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. So just being a scientist obviously wasn't going to work. But whatever. So I double majored biochemistry and social and political philosophy, went to law school, and then eventually learned, how to be a lawyer. And I think that was fantastic. And I liked having other people do the selling for me for a long time. It was nice to just learn. And also, honestly, I just didn't feel like I knew enough. There were some people that came in convinced they knew everything right from the beginning, but they were kind of full of crap. I mean, I'm sorry. It's just, and people are like that. There are people like that, whatever. I wasn't like that. I wanted to learn. So I thought before I, go sell myself, I'm going to learn. And so I did, but that took a while, but eventually, yeah, it's hard to get clients. Even once you decide to go out and get them, it's work. A lot of my colleagues who started their own firms went into patent prosecution where they get patents for people. Okay. But litigating stuff was what I liked the best. I really just enjoyed a lot more writing, a lot more creative writing. I mean, for getting patents, you're dealing with the examiners, but it's all very on the clock. It's much about efficiency. It just was, in litigation, you spend years on a handful of patents. If you're prosecuting patents, you're handling several hundred of those at a time. Okay. At all times. Okay. So it's just very different. I mean, it's just much more in depth. And I just grew to enjoy it. Also, it was one of my greater strengths. I mean, scientifically, a lot of the people I was competing with were perhaps better because they had PhDs. I don't know. I mean, again, I asked if it was worth getting a PhD. People said it's not really necessary anymore. And it truly wasn't. But still, there was a tier of work that I wasn't allowed to do because, no PhD. They didn't want to take the risk of somebody who might have been very good, undergrad, but who cares? How are they going to do it? But that was my main role. I mean, that was actually the thing that I did the best, I think, early on, was just write. I mean, because compared to a lot of patent attorneys too, who really couldn't write, I had some training, doing some writing, and I mean, I had social political philosophy, writing arguments about different philosophers. I mean, cases aren't really that different. It's actually a lot more straightforward because case analysis is very, I don't know. It's a little bit more cut and dry. Philosophical stuff gets very heady, and frankly, it was something I had to. My writing got completely screwed up by it. Okay, yeah, because you try to write like philosophers, and then all of a sudden they're like, "What is he saying?" You don't want judges to do that. Okay, so eventually, I had to kind of fix all that stuff. But no, I loved it, and I continued to like being a lawyer. But yeah, going out on my own, it was tough. And meanwhile, honestly, things, the internet happened, like a lot of things happened with all this, and I had this love of coding all along anyway. I mean, which I never really. I mean, I was technical in my practice. I did a lot of creative things, but not a lot. I mean, there's only so much you can do. So eventually, when I went on my own, I sort of ended up combining these two things and sort of became sort of both. So today I have sort of my startup, which has taken a lot longer than I thought it was going to take, and then my legal practice. So that's kind of where we are today. I mean, that's sort of the nutshell overview.
Man, that's awesome. And I really love the fact of what you said about you you really didn't know what you were wanting to do. Or I know you say you got into coding very early on, then you transitioned into like, different studies while you were in school, and then you went into law school, but you didn't really know exactly what you wanted to do. And I think that just right there goes to show that like sometimes hidden doors can open when you really don't even realize it. And,
Yep.
you
Yep.
don't, like, even for example, like, I went to school, even for myself, I went to school to, the ultimate goal is to be a personal trainer, actually not personal trainer, a athletic trainer, physical, strength and conditioning coach for UC basketball, University
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Cincinnati basketball. And that's my alma mater. And, COVID came around, kind of threw a wrench in a few things. And it's like, okay, I have this degree in exercise science, but then it's like, I don't know if I can really find like, by all means, exercise science is a great degree. Not saying that at all, but I just didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. But then other doors opened up to who I was able to meet with, go into the tech industry, go into some sales industries. But just the ability that sometimes you don't need to know exactly what you're doing, but sometimes when you do walk through those doors and you really digest that knowledge, it's like the connections that you can meet, the people that you can meet, the information exchange that you can have along the way, I think really plays a huge role into, those young entrepreneurs or, even, the mid entrepreneurs. I mean, or whatnot, at whatever age, even though you can feel a little lost at some point, sometimes just the journey itself is really all worth it when you kind of start building stones of who you meet, the knowledge transfer of certain things, and putting two and two together. But no, I just like that when you said that, then I figured it'd be a good point to point out to our audiences.
Fair enough,
The
and I'll build on that a little bit. I mean, patent law is a very it's not a very known field. I mean, it's sort of people kind of know it is. People know that there's patents. I mean, they sort of understand that, but I guess they don't really realize that you know this is a common misconception. I mean, people that get patents, they're kind of like, okay, so I've got this patent. It's like, yeah, okay, and so I want to stop this person. Okay, well now you have to hire a bunch of attorneys to go do that. It's like, the government does not do that for you. They will give you a patent. That is the right to exclude people. But the way you enforce that right is you have to go to court. Okay. Now, that I think for a lot of people is like, oh, shit. Okay. Because frankly, it is quite expensive. Okay. And a lot of people can't afford it. And so, it is also why patent, prosecution is a little tough because it's sort of like, yes, you get the patent, but it's just a piece of paper until you do something with it. And, I think anyway, so yeah, in fact, most patent attorneys didn't go straight through like me. Most of them, in fact, went into an area of science and then didn't like it or thought that they wanted to make more money or some combination thereof, and so that made them go to law school. But most people did not. I was a little lucky. Roommate, one of my roommates, his dad was a biotech venture capitalist guy, and so he was talking about he works with a lot of lawyers. And it's like, yeah, but the patent lawyers are the ones that always seem to be having fun, and it's true. I mean, we get to learn about all this freaking technology. It's really, really cool stuff. I mean, litigators not so much because we're not as much on the cutting edge. A lot of time it takes time for a market to develop before it's worth fighting over. The most cutting edge stuff goes to the prosecutors, but I can live with that. I like learning new stuff. It's new to me, so it's fine. Yeah, we learn fascinating amounts of stuff. We have to. It shocks some clients. I remember I had one client once who was I was crypto stuff actually I was working on at that point. And, he said, nobody understands this area. You have to read this book to do it. And so I did. And then I sent him a bill. And he's like, you sent me a bill for reading a book? It's like, you don't understand. Like patent lawyers, we are constantly having to learn new science. I mean, we don't know, like I mean, even a PhD has a PhD in something. Okay. It's not like everything. Okay. Even so, whatever. Anyway, but yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. And then yeah, eventually, but it got to be a point where you get senior, and then you realize people that have the clients are the ones making the big decisions about the case, and the big decisions about the case that affects your lifestyle a lot in terms of like are you pursuing something that's really dumb or not? I mean, or are we fighting a losing battle where everyone's on the same page? But we understand it's a risk, but we have to do this because it's just too important. Something like that. Okay. But anyway, I found that I liked being able to be the person to decide those kinds of questions as opposed to having somebody else decide them. I mean, I worked with some great folks, but they got older. My mentor actually has passed away about 10 years ago now. So eventually things change. Okay, I grew up under a certain group of people, and then I want to get this up. Also, I needed to leave the first firm I was at. They were really very PhD centric. So to do the kind of work to get a full sense of everything, I did need to go to some other firms. So I went to Sidley for a period, as well as she grew me in after that. But ultimately, just decided, hey, I just want to do my own thing, just to build my own practice, and then and also, yeah, I wanted to try to see what I could do with this computer science background that I had and stuff, and that's when I started experimenting with the startup stuff.
Well, I mean, that right there just goes to show it's like, don't be afraid to take a chance on yourself.
Well,
Like, don't
yeah.
be.
Well, also, I mean, law firms aren't like big companies where everything is fine. Like law firms aren't really like that. I mean, we go through business cycle. We're not big. I mean, even the biggest law firms are like 2,000 attorneys. Okay, those are big law firms. Okay, but most patent firms, most patent practitioners, it's like 100 people. Okay, that is not a lot of people. So and so I was kind of that was my joke was like I can go through a business cycle all by myself. I don't need I mean, the idea of working for a larger company is that they provide you some sort of, safe harbor during storms. Okay. But the truth is, they really didn't do that. Okay. They don't. I mean, law firms used to do it. They actually were at one point reputed to be, they would take care of their people through good and bad. And that was why you gave so much to them. Okay. But my experience with law firms, at least during the Great Recession, was no, they did not. So they take a lot from the good, and when it's bad, it's like, no, we're just going to treat you badly, like everybody else. So and look, and that's legit. I mean, at the end of the day, they're businesses, okay, and they can only carry so much. So I'm just like, okay, fine. If I'm going to go through these kinds of up and downs, I'll do it on my own too, okay. And also, I mean, I was part of a firm. I mean, at one point, Sugar, when I was there, I mean, the litigation practice was very small. I mean, it was a very small part of a larger firm, and the firm sort of knew that they needed it, but that was something that they knew for a long time, so they weren't willing to sort of bankroll it forever, and that's fine. So it's like, okay, great. So I'm a startup, but I'm inside of a big firm. Why don't I just take all the money for myself? Whatever we collect anyway, and then deal with that. So yeah, I think, and also there were some collections issues that affected stuff because I mean, all firms have them, but I mean, really big firms again doesn't matter, making so much money, you don't care about it. But once you start getting down to the point where it's like this is your client and they're not paying, then it's like, okay, well, it's not my fault really, but on the other hand, I can go not collect money from somebody on my own too. So I don't know. I just find that once you get to that stage, you're kind of like, yeah, I'm this institution is not doing enough for me. And I can do just I can have all these same risks, but on the other hand, I have much more of an upside as opposed to having all the same risks and still giving a lot away, even when things were going well, which didn't compute as well. So that's what drove me out ultimately, which, happened to a bunch of colleagues too.
Well, no, I mean, that's actually an amazing story there, man. You know, it, I mean, it's a good point. It's like, if I'm going to go through all these different business cycles, the ups and downs, I'll do it myself. I'll go
Yeah,
through myself
yeah.
with
I
it.
mean,
I like
it
that.
didn't really
And
feel so risky. I mean, in other words, you say it's risky, but what became risky was staying inside of a big institution when they don't really offer the security that they're supposed to. I mean,
yeah.
that was so. I mean, this is also part of how like changing norms about law firms have changed over time. And I've been practicing for 30 years now, so I mean, unfortunately, like I used to hear people say things like that and think, oh wow, that's cool that they had that much experience. Now that I've done it, it's kind of like, yeah, it's cool, but it's also tough because it means things are changing so much. So you're making calculations based on kind of old expectations, and as those expectations are changing, you're realizing. So I stuck with larger firms, maybe longer than I should have, but whatever. Anyway, I made the move when I did, and no regrets. And I think that, yeah, no, and I'm really excited. And certainly AI is also turbocharged what I'm planning on doing here. So I'm really excited to be out here and doing this because I think, a lot of my colleagues are inside of big firms and they can't really experiment with this stuff to the extent that I'll be able to do. So that's too bad.
Well, so really, man, I think that we're really interested. I'm also very interested. So Being a patent attorney, first of all, I do think I think that is actually very cool. I really, to be honest with you, first time I really heard the word like patent is really, way back in the day when I was watching Shark Tank.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a patent for this. I don't have a patent for this. I'm working on getting a patent for this, my product. It's like, so really coming across a patent attorney, it's like, I do think that just like you said, you come across really cool technologies, cool products. So what would you say, like, for those, who are going to be watching this and who are watching this and they don't really know what a patent attorney really does or what's a day in the life. What do you do on a daily basis?
Yeah. I don't know the exact numbers that break down, but there are two basic kinds of patent attorneys. There's one kind that gets patents from the patent office. Okay. So the patent office employs a huge number of people, and all those people have to interface with patent attorneys who are trying to get patents in their areas. Okay. So they're subject matter expertise, and that can really be deep subject matter expertise, like for telecom and stuff like that. If all you have is a degree in telecommunications or even a PhD, I don't even know if they have a TP, but basically they wanted industry experience. You had to have industry experience. I mean, just knowing double E wasn't enough because it was just sort of like, yeah, okay, but what we're building is like way more than anything. And so if you're patenting the cutting edge in telecom, you really have to have some experience. Other areas maybe not so much, but if you're like a total chemistry, organic chemistry jock, then you focus on organic chemistry. Like here's the most cutting edge, whatever. And it's different things. I mean, most of my career was spent on, pharmaceuticals. Okay. Pharmaceuticals are little molecules that make a lot of money. Okay. Compared to almost everything else. Like, I mean, there's industrial chemistry out there. Okay. But and maybe some of it's very valuable. I don't really know. Okay. But what is really valuable is Prozac. And it doesn't cost much to make it. So the patent is the only thing that keeps it, from being very widely distributed and stuff. So my first case was Prozac. And then I worked on some other cases. We worked on Augmentin. Cymbalta was another one that I worked on, Strattera. So these are all multi-billion-dollar drugs. So it's great. I mean, this is the best situation you could possibly be in, where you're a rounding error, like not even a rounding it. You're barely even worth noting. But so even a bill of $1 million a month, I mean, it's kind of like, yeah, but how much did you just make on this drug for that month? So what, and yes, we're the thing that's keeping the generics at bay. And there's a whole elaborate mechanism there. I won't get into that. But basically, yes, we fight against generics primarily. Okay. And then, biochemistry's come along. There's a different set of laws for that. And that actually, it's kind of funny. It got passed as part of Obamacare. And since nobody thought Obamacare was going to pass, nobody really studied the new rules. And then all of a sudden one day we woke up and, oh, wow, it passed. So, oh, we have all these new rules to fight over. So that changed things some, but not a lot. I mean, I studied biochemistry undergrad. Everybody thought, the biologics were going to come along right away. They really didn't. But yeah, so we fight about stuff. So basically, it's like, yeah, it's one of those drugs like Prozac or something. At some point, the patents are ending. Okay. And the generics say, we want to go make that. And in some cases, they don't want to wait till the patents expire. They say the patents should never have been issued in the first place, or you lied to get the patents or whatever. Okay. And then make some kind of charge to try to get in early. And if they succeed, they get in early, and it's worth billions of dollars. So that's what's worth a certain amount of money. So yeah, people try to come in early on all these patents, and you argue about it. I mean, that's what you do. I mean, you spend, and so life in the day. So first of all, it's a huge amount of documents you send back and forth that relate to this. Most of what we do is discovery. I mean, this is no mystery. In Europe, they have no discovery, and so I don't really know how they do cases, because I don't know how you litigate something honestly where like everything the other side is bullshitting you about. You can't figure out what they're bullshitting you about. Like, I don't understand. I mean, I guess you do all kinds of stuff in court. You do magic and cross-examination, but the best way to catch people on a lie is to look at their email. Okay. Not to see what they can do in court.
Well, also, like, being a patent attorney, like, couldn't you essentially have literally, I mean, literally like two exact models of something, but then the patent is literally, I mean, the tiniest little bit, and then because that patent over that, it's like that product right there essentially trumps, kind of takes over the whole patent, or does that kind of make sense? Like, I guess
Well,
essentially,
yeah, this is where it gets really complicated. I mean,
okay,
frankly, yeah. Okay, so patent law is a right to exclude people. There is a
okay.
Supreme Court opinion that actually, I think it was a dissent or something like that, where in fact a Supreme Court justice who doesn't know enough about patent law says exactly the opposite. And of course, this was also fun for people who then could go and incite that against the government, because then the government wouldn't want to ever say anything bad about a Supreme Court justice. Because a lot of people think it's the right to do something. In other words, if the patent is issued, it says this is what you own. You have the right to do that. That's not true. It's particularly not true in the drug area because you have to get FDA approval. So,
Yeah.
and so for among other things, PTO has nothing to do with FDA regulatory approval. So the FDA examines it whether it's safe and effective. Okay, then all that kind of thing. They don't really necessarily. The intellectual property piece of it's totally different. The PTO doesn't need FDA approval to issue something. Okay, they are, however, interrelated. So the fact is that because you can't commercialize it right away, there's something called patent term extension. So because you're going to suffer some delay from at the FDA compared to other patentees, you don't get to enjoy as much time. Well, that's certainly true, but of course you're getting billions of dollars. So compared to most of the patentees, I'm not sure it's totally unfair. Whatever. Okay, I no longer have an axe to grind. I've been on both sides of the industry, so I'm not generic. I'm not. I just know the history. That's why Hatch-Waxman got done. Hatch-Waxman was this structure which basically created patent term extension, and the deal for that, and the generics got to come in and be generics. That basically created our generic industry. And even for 10 years after it got passed, nobody wanted to touch it. But now it's, yeah, I mean, without that law, there would be no generic industry. So it's quite important. But yeah, in terms of like what patent requirements are, so it's new, useful, and non-obvious to one of ordinary skill in the art at the time of the invention. Okay. So that's the hard one. The last one. Okay. New, is it different from everything else? Sometimes that's kind of hard to figure out because you got to scour the earth. Okay. To some extent. I mean, there are different categories of prior art and stuff like that. So you do subpoena a lot of people to find out what they were working on at the time. And sometimes that can really matter. So you do look for things. But, when it comes to pharmaceuticals, it's such a heavily regulated industry. The FDA gateways everything. There are not a lot of mysteries about what's out there too much. I mean, there are some, okay? And I mean, I had a case, was a vaccine case, where we had a potential theory about some stuff that had happened. I don't know. There were lots of theories we had in that case. And that's what you do. When you have when you don't really know what the facts are and you have $1 billion on the table, you just investigate everything. You end up talking to lots of people. You read a lot of documents, you subpoena a lot of folks. And then in some of the cases too, the documents are in foreign languages. So you have to actually try to, you can bring in people that speak foreign languages, but the problem is usually they don't understand the science either. So but yeah, day in and day out, I mean, you're managing a big document review. You've got people whose whole job is to make your life miserable on the other side. So they're sending you letters and you're sending them letters and you're filing motions. So you just got to do that day in and day out. I mean, to some extent, it depends on your role in the case. Okay. So in different periods of my life, it meant different things. When you're junior, you're reading documents maybe. Okay. When you get a little bit more senior, you start doing a little bit more advanced stuff. But, it's kind of funny, but it depends, I mean, on the practice areas to some extent, because some practice areas go to trial more than others. We went to trial 100% of the time because New York had decided that you can't pay generics any money. So none of our cases could settle because if we paid anybody, the only way to get anybody to go away is to pay them something usually. But that was per se illegal. Decision eventually either got reversed or changed. Anyway, eventually the norm changed. But, for most people that much money, they don't want to go to trial and risk it. So they, settle their cases. But what that means is the lawyers in that practice area don't go to trial. That's a big difference. So that means their day never includes the real thing that most people think lawyers do all the time, which is go to trial. So if you don't know how to do it, that's a problem. And so frankly, we actually got to be on a lot of cases. I got to be on a lot of double E cases because those guys never went to trial. I mean, they needed people that actually knew, if we actually have to do this, we need somebody actually to do it. So yeah, it really depended on the case, the role, how big it was, how much money, people were willing to spend. I mean, so it's sort of all over the map, but yeah, mostly fighting. I mean, mostly just fighting with people. Whereas if you're a prosecutor, you're spending your entire day dealing with the US government and filing stuff back and forth about why your invention meets those qualifications. Okay. But you're doing it for hundreds of patents at a time and you're just cranking it out as quickly as you can. That's kind of it. That's what their day looks like.
Well, it sounds like it's of course busy and
Busy, but
yeah,
also
because
they have
like
quality of life. They have predictability. In other words,
yeah.
no one's deliberately trying to make their lives miserable. Okay, I had more emergency motions in one case on a Friday. Every freaking Friday afternoon, they would file an emergency motion. That meant that my weekend was shot because technically an emergency motion should be ruled on as soon as possible. You don't get any response. It's done ex parte, so it's such an emergency you can't hear from the other side, so you have to get in there as fast as you can. Yeah, that was great. But that's life. I mean, you really have to kind of. But I like that I'm competitive. I used to. I don't know when I was younger, I was competitive at running and stuff like that. So I've got a competitive streak. You have to. I mean, if you don't enjoy competition, if like winning doesn't matter to you, it's really hard to like litigation. I
Mhm.
mean, because it really is a competition all the time. And so every time, but yeah, I mean, it's fun when you're kicking their butt. Yeah, it feels really good. You can't
I
always
bet
do
it
that.
is. Oh, I
unfortunately.
bet it is, absolutely. So one thing, Geoffrey, that I really wanna know is, if with these patent attorneys that are out there, I mean, I think that, when someone's really trying to figure out, like, who would be, like, the best person to be able to, work on this with me, and, there can be different options and different competitors out there, and like you said, you have to have a little competition, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's, if you don't have that competitive edge, and you just let anyone and everyone, your competitors, walk all over you, I don't think you'll be able to survive. So what makes you different for someone to, find you and to be like, hey, you know what? I want Geoffrey Mason to work on this for me. What would you say your
I have been blessed with a lot of great experience. I worked on really big cases where I was blessed to have clients that had a lot of money. So, you learn a lot. It's a little bit like asking, if you're part of the Navy SEALs or something like that, does that give you better experience than being somebody who's somewhere in the military? Yes, it does. Because, we were working on consistently on bet the company type cases. I mean, these cases, we had to do everything we could to win them. And they were also, in some cases pretty challenging, and which is why they also pay a lot of money. I mean, the easy cases don't come to the firms that are most expensive because they don't need to spend that much. I mean, there's a certain point at which it is kind of dumb to spend too much money. Okay. For most of these drugs, even if the cases were easy, you probably would spend that money. But, the in-house guy, look, at the end of the day, he's going to get fired if something goes wrong with the counsel selection. Nobody wants to hear that you saved a little bit of money on the counsel fees, yet you lost the case. Okay. So if you lose the case,
yeah.
what you want to be able to say in every situation is, look, I looked out there. We all talked about this. We thought this was the best people for it. They lost. Oh, well. They need to be able to say that. And to say that, they have to spend a lot of money, which of course makes it harder for somebody like me when I'm first starting out anyway to get out there. Okay. But since then, I've done a lot of stuff. I've become, I think I got a lot of experience in that area, but I've also rounded myself out a lot more. So, like a lot of patent attorneys, I've learned a lot about other areas of law. I mean, patent attorneys tend to be very narrow specialists. I'm not so much. I mean, at this point, I know how to set up corporations, set up all kinds of stuff because clients, smaller clients, they can't afford specialists for everything. I mean, they just can't. I mean, large companies can, but most companies don't want that. So I was constantly pressed to do stuff. And once you get outside of a large law firms won't let you learn new areas. That's very bad for their malpractice. I get the impression, and also just plain old management. I mean, you've got 1,800 attorneys. If they're all trying to do new things, you don't know what you're managing. Okay, if you have 1,800 attorneys that are all in their little lane and they're all super experts and they're the best in a certain lane and that's all they want to do, that's much easier to manage. And I get that. I mean, patent attorneys are famous. Actually, there's a wonderful malpractice case, Medicines Company, where they missed a deadline for a patent term extension that cost billions of dollars. Okay, they missed it by like one day, and it's a malpractice that's just off scale in terms of what somebody messed up a deadline. Okay, one person, but all the partners were liable. Okay, for billions of dollars of malpractice, all jointly and of course their malpractice policy was not for several billion dollars. I can tell you that. So it is important. Okay, it's really important to know who you're really working with, and so I think. So going to a smaller firm lets you then grow more and learn more things. And I think some people do that. And then that just means we offer a lot more value. I mean, frankly, because then I know somebody's business and I can help them across a much broader range of areas. So that's another point of distinction as well. And plus, I'm really good with technology, which we can get into in the second point. But that does help things. It doesn't help everything. Technology. I'm sorry. At the end of the day, it can't do. I mean, a lot of what we do really is creative, and it's hard to understand that until you start reading these. Supreme Court cases are sort of the ultimate version of this, where creativity is a huge part of it and things have changed over time. But most litigation is. I mean, when you're totally dead in the water and there's nothing to say, you just write a check. You don't hire a bunch of attorneys to give them an impossible mission. And because frankly, to some extent, we can't do it either. At some point, we actually have to say, no, ethically speaking, yeah, you can make that argument if you're willing to put your bar license on the table. I'm not, so don't ask me to do that. I won't do that. So you have to, make some choices there. But I think, but yeah, I think aggressive cases sometimes you really have to be pretty creative, and that's where AI. That's the one thing it just absolutely is not. I mean, that having AI come up with I mean, new pictures, yes. Crazy pictures, sure. Okay. But, crazy isn't what wins in the courtroom. It's something that actually sounds really very grounded. But in fact, there may be a lot of gray areas in terms of what the law actually says. So technology is always changing. So when we argue cases, as often, the cases, I mean, the technology is so different from everything that came before. You can't say that any cases have said anything about it before. So we're constantly having to deal with that. Plus, even reading the cases, you have to understand the technology in the cases. It really does require a technical background. It's one of the things that you have to do with it. So I don't know. And I think people sort of like me. So I don't know, whatever. I try to do what I can do to get people come in for different, honestly, people like me for different reasons. And so those are all the reasons that I know the people that like me for.
There we
So
go.
whatever. I don't know. I don't know. And it's not like you ask your client. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I mean, like people do customer surveys, but I don't send them surveys about things. I mean, I just sort of, the way is they paid their bills. But yeah.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's all. I mean, yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like, they pay their bills, so no. So now shifting over a little bit to the industry itself, what would you say is like, Jeffrey? What would you say, that you notice a shift in certain things when it comes to the patent attorney industry in itself? Like, have there been any shifts away from certain things? How has like technology played a big role in it? You talked a little bit about it, like, and I can absolutely see it. This day and age now, having a technical background, having a software, coding background, I do think helps a lot, especially, in this modern day era of technology. But what would you say, like, on the industry trends itself? What have you noticed, like, in a shift of things? Like, has this industry gone away from certain things, gone more towards certain things? I don't know. I know that's a very broad question, but
No, that's fine. And there are a lot of things I could pick on, and I'll just pick one thing because there are a lot of things I could say. Okay,
okay.
some of which I probably
Share it, man.
anyway. But no, but look, the most interesting thing to me, from my perspective, is that everybody sort of thinks law firms, technically incompetent and things like that. It's not really the case. It's that our compensation model doesn't reward efficiency. It just doesn't. Okay, so it really is one of these things where and I guess I read the other day, like, top billing rates now are $3,500 an hour. I mean, that's all very new to me. Okay, so yeah, I mean, billing rates are high. Okay, they're not that high for many people, I can tell you. And even breaking 1,000, I still remember people doing that. I mean, I'm not I'm getting there, but I'm not there yet. But anyway, still, yeah, it's just that's the problem, is because efficiency is not rewarded. I mean, on the one hand, no, you don't just sit around and like Goldberg, because particularly at large, when you're getting close to $1,000 an hour, bullshitting doesn't count. Okay, so you really are billing for. I mean, because people audit your bills and everything. I mean, it's closely watched. It's not like an hourly rate where you watch people building a road or something, and you got 5 guys sitting around watching one guy do work. Okay, that's you put that on the bill, you got a problem. And it happens. I mean, there are people at law firms that don't have enough to do, and so it is a real issue. But whatever. I mean, good management on your part, and particularly the guy that works on the bill before it goes out and sees, oh yeah, this is bullshit. I gotta cut that off the bill. Okay. So the biggest change for me, though, is, in fact, in patent law in particular. I mean, patent law is such a specialty, and the needs are so unique. The big publishers, LexisNexis, I mean, Westlaw basically invented the Dewey Decimal System for law cases. Okay, that's how far back they go. Okay, that was an
Okay.
innovation, and it really was. I mean, to be perfectly honest, back then people thought, oh, we all agree, we're all reasonable people, we must all agree on things. It's just that when people finally indexed everything and read all the cases, they're like, oh crap! I mean, it turns out we don't all agree on everything. So that's when people started realizing the case research was kind of important. So thank you, Westlaw Company. Okay, because otherwise it was just a bunch of government cotton courts pumping out published decisions, okay, with no index. Okay, they're just there. It was this person sued that person on this day. Okay, and we decided their case, and here it is. Okay, I mean, just from hundreds of courts all across the country. Okay, and for pretty about worldwide. So until people started organizing this stuff, yeah, it was kind of like most judges were kind of just making it up. Okay, I mean, and that's pretty. I mean, they probably knew some cases, they'd seen inexperienced judges had done enough stuff, but the research was pretty limited. Lexis came up with the idea of, okay, well, why don't we digitize everything? Okay, yeah, that's really smart. So that's good, and that's really been the two big innovations ever. I mean, so now, though, there were so many areas that frankly resembled the law before Westlaw or Lexis, like patent file histories, for example, is something I mine a lot of, that you still can't search for them. Okay. To this day, they're not digitized. They're not searchable. There's no way to do it. And so one of the things I started doing is build databases that let you search. So you can go find all kinds of stuff. And this is great for litigation, because litigation is mostly about reading documents and trying to figure out something to stick it to the other guy. And honestly, documents that nobody thought would ever be able to get to, okay, those are the best, okay? I mean, in the early days of email, people were still being really stupid with email. Now people know not to send stupid emails, okay? But in the early days of email, they did not know how to send. And so emails were great. They had so much good stuff in them, so they were a pain, but they were really good. And the same thing is true for patent file history, as far as I'm concerned, is everybody wrote these things thinking, oh, no one will ever be able to find it. Well, guess what? When there's enough money, I'm going to go find it, okay? So you build products like that. But I mean, the publishing companies, they sort of, at this point, they're such cash. It's like any large company. They don't innovate really. They kind of do, but they're basically an exit strategy for small legal tech people that want to do something. So, so actually, yeah, a lot of the legal databases that are getting built are built by smaller companies. But I mean, that's not really my business model. I don't really want to manage a bunch of sales reps, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't want LexisNexis to be like my model. Where I'm like, I'm managing 100 sales guys across the country. Like, okay. But when do I get to practice law and have fun anymore? Okay. I mean, I'm basically just pushing I don't, that's not my idea. So I've sort of veered away from some of those kinds of things that are much more sales intensive. And plus also we're coming out with some other stuff where, for example, again, this gets back to, the very limited. So the government websites for patents, but even Google's patents, they're all sort of, when they came out, they were great. They were revolutionary. It was awesome. Oh, we can type in a patent and actually get, I mean, it used to be no internet. You had to pay a service. Okay. The service would go probably to the patent office and make a copy of something and then fax it to you or whatever. Okay. That was the fast way to get a patent. The slow way may take a few days, but now, yeah, type on your computer to have it come up. Great. So anyway, I think that, some technology can be improved there. So what I've seen is that finally people are coming up with better databases outside of these big companies. And those are really helping improve transparency, because when I first started doing all this stuff, I had to do all the databases myself, like just everything. Now there's much more services like that. And I do think it's improved things a lot. But AI is going to be the thing that really makes it crazy. So it's frankly, we're starting to see that, but whatever trends there are, the AI trend is going to be the one to really watch, because that's going to do a lot more things than we've done so far.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And would you agree, what would you have to say about AI? Use it as a tool, or is it going to be the end all be all to
Well, for me, I mean, like when I was doing a lot of my work, I had to pay for a developer to sit around all the time to do stuff. We were building stuff, but also a lot of our stuff needed some custom work. And now that overhead's gone. And that's huge. Okay.
Yeah.
Because honestly, law firms hate overhead. Okay. They really can't bear it. They have no good way of bearing it. So it does mean that people can be a lot more sophisticated about what they're doing, which actually, to some extent, undercuts my business. But the fact is that I'll probably still be able to use those agents better than anybody at the law firm anyway. So I'm not too worried about that part of it, because yeah, it will make a big difference. How good it is, I don't know, because I'm learning at the same time as everybody else. There are people that are coming out. There are some AI products right now, but they tend to be for like contract review and stuff, which again, it's not what I do. I mean, we do some of that. I do some of that, but that's not a big part of my practice. I mean, so for patent law, I think that the potential is there, but you're sort of combining two things, knowledge of science as well as knowledge of law in one bucket. And I don't know how good the LLMs really are at doing that kind of stuff. I've started experimenting with it. I'm basically using my old briefs as training modules because I know they're good. So if this thing says it's good, great. Okay, that you're right. But but then I also got to test it on some other stuff too. But still,
absolutely?
yeah. But yeah, I'm still just experimenting with it, and I think I don't know how good it can get. The funny, I mean, LexisNexis and Westlaw right now have their products. I don't think they're very good. LexisNexis's main selling point seems to be trashing Westlaw and saying Westlaw will get you in trouble. It's like, okay, fine, but why would I spend money on either one of you? And I've seen what they do. It is impressive in its own way, except that law is so well indexed and so well, there's such good secondary sources. It's not, I mean, LLMs seem to sort of shine the most, where it's like an enormous amount of data where nobody could ever do it either programmatically or by hand, and it will give you some insight into what's in that giant black box. Okay, that is something that's true. Law is not like that. Law, I mean, like I said, like going back 120 years ago, Westlaw made it 150 at this point. Just Dewey Decimal System, that was a huge innovation. Digitizing cases, LexisNexis, that was a huge innovation. And then secondary sources, yes, there's massive amounts of secondary sources. So AI has a lot to compete with, really, in our area, a lot, because there's so much money involved in it. And so that's where I think the value is much more challenging, but it's there. I mean, there's a huge amount of stuff that frankly doesn't get done because it doesn't fit in the billable hour model that should get done. And AI will let it get done at billable hour kind of model sort of prices, I think, without too much difficulty. So I think it will change things a lot, but we're still super early days in that.
Absolutely. And that is a good point though. And my thought process on AI really is, if you got to use it as a tool. And I feel like, once it's more used as a tool and, talking to different, entrepreneurs in different industries, I mean, I hear a lot about just, really like, you got to train the AI system to essentially, think how you're thinking. And when you are able to do that and able to utilize it throughout your day-to-day work, it can absolutely be very helpful. But then, of course, you talk to the ones that maybe that are not as tech savvy. It's like AI is going to, take over my job, take over this. I mean, absolutely, AI can replace positions and replace jobs, of course. But I also do think that it's just like it's just a different way to like, look at it. If you look at AI as like the end all be all, like, it's going to take over the world. Well, it's not going to take over the world. I mean, you still need humans, you still need the interaction, you still need that personality, that persona, right? But yeah, I mean, AI, though, it's like generating it and using it as a tool can be, I feel like, extremely, extremely helpful to really, I mean, honestly, almost all industries, really, that use technology.
Yeah, and what's interesting about law too is that there's so little software. So I mean, people talk about software companies, people, the stock market's software companies have been taking a beating recently. I
Yeah.
mean, there isn't a lot of software inside of law firms, okay? In fact, there's a lot less than there should be. People really don't know how to use Excel at all well, which if they did, they really could do a lot of things much more easily. So honestly, I think in some ways LLMs will end up doing something that if actually everyone knew how to use Excel properly, they could probably do a lot of these things too. Instead, they'll use an LLM for it because they can just talk to it. Lawyers can talk. All lawyers can talk. Okay,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
almost. I mean, all successful lawyers could talk. Put it that way. But Excel. But doing things in Excel is takes some work, and frankly, doing sophisticated things in Excel takes some work. And a lot of developers use it for prototyping, and I use it before I was doing even any tech stuff. I would use it a lot in my cases. And there's
Mhm.
a lot you can do, and there's a lot of things you should do because I mean, even just auditing what's going on in your IT department, for example. So, like, their database is supposed to be complete. Well, what happens if I export it into Excel and look for things that aren't in my database? That's actually very valuable. It may not be possible to do in your client application. It may be considered, your IT department should do that. So it's in their bucket. Okay. But they don't have the time to really check things. And so, yeah, I would dump out databases just to see which, documents didn't have any OCR, for example. I mean, we thought we had OCR for everything. We don't. But, you have to do that kind of stuff. You can do that kind of stuff in Excel, but you can actually probably also do it in LLM. In fact, the LLM will walk you through everything, like exporting it from all the different stupid things you have to actually learn once. You can just talk to something about it. So, no, I think LLMs will be very helpful for law firms behind the scenes. I really do. I mean, I think that will be a big difference. And I think they can do that internally because I think that, it's just one of these. I mean, so many other areas have been so much software, so much software intensive behavior and stuff like that. There's still going to be improvements there, but it's not as much. I mean, they've done so much more in those areas. I think law firms, because we've had so little good software for us and so little tech savviness, it's going to help a lot. And then I think it's really is going to transform a lot of things. But those products haven't been built yet. I have some idea about some things that could work, but I don't even know if they're going to work myself. So I got to go figure it out. But some of this stuff's going to work, and it is going to be really interesting what it does.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And, Jeffrey, so with you having essentially different, really a big background into different, areas of life, you're a patent attorney, you have a background in technology, coding when you were, sixth grade, seventh grade, you said, you didn't really know exactly what you wanted to do, like going into college. And then, you studied, you kind of dabbled into some, into law practice. What would be like a big piece of advice for, from yourself, the success that you've had, the start that you have going on right now, even though it is taking a little bit longer than you've expected, right? Your practice. What would be a really great piece of advice to be able to leave our audiences on, you know, when those young entrepreneurs that they don't know maybe where they want to go, maybe they have something in mind, but they don't know how to pursue it, or they just essentially feel stuck. Where exactly or what exactly would you say would be a good and piece of advice for them?
Yeah. So, I mean, the advice I would give is, again, based on probably a mistake a lot of people make and that I made too, which is that, there's a temptation when you first start thinking about a product that you're going to sell. You become enthralled by the fact that you can build something that's new, that's not out there, and that's better than what's out there. Okay. That can be really intoxicating, but it means almost nothing. I mean, it's really about selling. Ultimately, you've got to be able to sell it. Okay. And selling to law firms is actually pretty hard. Law firms and lawyers are really busy. I mean, other industries, I mean, everybody works hard to some extent, but they have more flex in their time. We have to account for every hour. Okay. So any day, any hour we're spending listening to salespeople, we're not making money. That really is hard. Okay. And also selling, I mean, the other industry that's terribly hard to sell into is the financial industry. So what I went after first was, frankly, trying to do a Bloomberg terminal for Wall Street. But that really means competing with iBank research departments. I didn't really know that. I mean, I sort of knew there were iBanks. I knew there were research departments, but I figured, okay, I'm just a guy. I mean, but I also knew the people that had newsletters that were out there selling newsletters. Okay, so I figured, okay, fine. I mean, I'll do the same thing. But really, it's hard. I mean, everybody knows they have all the money in the world, so getting to these guys is really tough. So selling to finance firms is just too hard. So I was going in that direction until finally I got a really good talking to by, somebody's wife of one of my roommates from college who did sales to these kinds of funds and said, look, you have no way to sell this. And also she had retired at that point, more or less. She was having kids and stuff. And she's like, I can't even sell this market anymore. And I used to know how to do it. I go, okay. Whereas law firms were a little easier, but they're still very hard. So it is a difficult market to sell to. And so you have to think about those things. Okay. It is not, what's kind of funny is that as a lawyer, I know how lawyers sell. I sell as a lawyer. I know what that marketing looks like. But when you start getting into technology products, you're in a very different space. So it's very important. I think it's a little crazy to build like mass market things because particularly for lawyers, it's a little tough. But I think there's a sense to it because you're getting a lot of exposure. I mean, diverting a time away from an attorney is really hard, but you can do it. I mean, there are ways to do it. And so I just thinking about sale. So now when I design products, I don't think about what's possible or what's the coolest thing or what even the most valuable thing. I think about what's the thing I can sell the easiest, basically, and go not sort of backwards from there. I mean, it's iterative. Okay. You just sort of look at lots of different things, but you have to be thinking about it because I see so much, and it's a chronic situation where you have a CTO and they have no idea how to market because they're a really good engineer. I think particularly with AI, okay, the CTO position and the CTO piece of this is much less important. And I think even for investors, I mean, that would be the other advice. I mean, what you really need to know is, can these people really sell? Okay. I mean, and not being able to build the technology, that risk has gotten a lot less of a problem. Okay. With AI, I mean, some things are really still impossible. Okay, fine. But on the other hand, with AI, you can churn out a lot of stuff that you wouldn't expect. So I just think, I don't know, I just think selling is becoming much more important for all entrepreneurs. Okay. Because in fact, the technology piece has become not easy because it's still, you got to know stuff to do AI. Even with AI, there's all kinds of stuff you got to do with it, but still it solves a lot of problems, okay, that otherwise are crippling. And I think, frankly, even I mean, my developer fell apart at one point. They probably wouldn't have if in fact they could have used AI, okay? But, in fact, when this happened, there wasn't any AI. So I just got stuck. I was completely, I gave them a bunch of money. They never delivered anything. There was a lawsuit and whatever. But I mean, who cares? I mean, what I wanted was a product, not a lawsuit. And so, yeah, so a lot of technology risk goes away too, I think, to some extent. So look, be thinking about how you're going to sell it, okay? Because really, that's almost the most important. It's become much more, it's always been important. It's always been an issue with entrepreneurs, but my feeling is that AI makes it much more important than it even has been in the past. So that's my advice is think carefully about how you're going to make money.
Well, I love that. I mean, I do love that. It's like, again, if you have a product that can be able to, or a service that can absolutely be a value to others, you got to be able to sell it. I mean, to be able to keep doing what you're doing, you got to be able to have a personality to be able to, to be able to sell it and to be able to talk to individuals about your product, about your service. And yeah, I'm a big believer that if you go inside the entrepreneur route, no matter what it is, you're gonna have to sell it. You're gonna have to sell at some
Yeah.
point. And that's a great. I mean, honestly, that's a great piece of advice because I feel like sometimes some of these young entrepreneurs they don't necessarily they can have an idea, but they're not really the best at essentially selling or talking to people.
And that was tolerable when it was so hard to build things, right? I mean,
Yeah.
when custom software was super expensive, okay, then we put up with the dork, we put up with the problems he's got with social situations, okay, because we need the software, okay. I mean, this is a chance to get software at a price that we're not going to get it any other way. Now it's
Mhm.
like, okay, now with AI, I can get software really cheap, so maybe we don't need to put a dork in charge as much, okay. I mean, it's just a little different, and so I really do think looking at some stuff. I'm looking at some legal tech companies that are out there, and I think that investors haven't or incubators haven't quite caught on to this enough yet. Okay, because I really do think they should be thinking much more about salespeople that are really good and have no technical knowledge, as opposed to people with really good technical knowledge that have no clue how to sell. Because, and particularly in legal tech, I mean, it's really hard to sell to this market. I mean, patent law is its own specialty. Most lawyers can't understand it. Okay, so going in there with like no back, I mean, it's like and also, I mean, trust is such a huge part of this. I mean, this is one of the biggest things about me selling my technology anyway, is like, look, I'm a lawyer. I'm a lawyer just like you. In fact, in a lot of cases, I've got a lot more experience than you do. You know, I'm telling you something about how to do your life better. I'm not 25, okay, with no background at all. Okay, that's harder to see why I'm telling you something you should know. Okay, and lawyers don't like taking advice from other, but they do. We take advice from each other, but it's definitely gradated by how much knowledge you have. So it's really hard to sell to this market. So I don't know. I just think we're going to see a huge change across the board. But I think most of all, yeah, we're have to get away with this idea that software is such a king. It's really not. I mean, so even the big companies taking hits, but in terms of even how software or even how entrepreneurs develop, I just think it's going to totally change. It's going to be people that, then they say, the one man unicorn is coming, right? Well, that one man unicorn is going to be really good at selling. That's for sure the case. Okay. There's no way that one man unicorn only knows how to build really good software. Okay. Because that doesn't work anymore. Okay. So, we're seeing that, but I don't think people have gotten onto it yet. I still think people are still thinking too much the old way. So they should change.
Well, so just, Jeffrey, before we do wrap up here, because again, man, I've had a great time discussing with you, and honestly, man, with your background, with your knowledge, really essentially very, when I say very broad, it's very broad, but yet you utilize all your knowledge into what you're doing now, which I really do think that's inspiring to these up and coming entrepreneurs to really, take time to learn, take time to really build knowledge, and all those little pieces of knowledge that you've learned that can really stack up. What so before we do wrap up here, I want to give you the floor. How can our audience find you if you do have a social media handle, email, website? How can they find you? If they come up against
Fast
this and
Yeah.
they need someone to patent it.
Sorry. Yeah. So I've committed the biggest sin. I haven't said that. So my company is Fast Patent Partner. Okay. So the website for Fast Patent Partner, fastpatentpartner.com, fpp.com would probably cost me a fortune. So maybe someday. Okay. But for now, it's fastpatentpartner.com. And yeah, there's contact forms on there, and that's the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Well, perfect. Easy enough. Well, Jeffrey, seriously, man, I really do thank you so much for your time. And I feel
But
like we can keep talking. And I feel like
yeah,
I feel like maybe in a part two of this would actually be very knowledgeable.
do it because you're right. There is a lot to cover here.
Yeah, absolutely. And not even necessarily just about, what you're doing in the patent law firm industry is also the simple fact that you're a fascinating guy, man. Just again with
Thanks.
all your knowledge, with your charisma, with your personality, it's like talking to you, and I feel like, having an audience hear what you've gone through, your when it comes to your knowledge and what all that you've accomplished. I do feel like that's a very good, very solid motivating factor. So I do
Yeah, I mean
appreciate.
but that is kind of the way all of us have to sell. I mean, in other words, we really have to
Absolutely.
show that. Look, I mean, there's a reason why I cost this much, okay? And it's not because I'm turning around and chat GPTing everything you're asking me. No, it's because I've lived a lot of this sort of stuff. And frankly, I mean, this is the other thing is most of the stuff that you learn in the law, you learn in secret. I mean, and that's important. Okay, so even if you chat GPT everything, there are not answers out there. We don't talk about our cases. We can't. Okay,
Mhm.
so really you have to have gone through this kind of stuff, and it really is important. It doesn't teach you everything because everything tends to be a little different, but yeah, it's important. And yeah, there really is a lot to learn, and that's just it. I love learning, and that was also the other reason why I went into this field is because I really enjoyed it. I didn't like it wasn't me like saying, "Oh, get me out of college or law school. I hate learning things." I mean, learning things in the abstract I hate, okay? Because at a certain point, it's like, yeah, I don't want something useful, okay? Not 3 years of, every kind of law subject we can think of. But yeah, but you're still learning a lot, and you have to love to do it. So really, it is important to do that and to be in a field where I think you can do that. And lots of people become lawyers before they become a lot of other things. So I mean, I think it's great. I do think that the legal personality is a specific kind of thing. And so a lot of people that are I would say sort of bright and wimpy, this is not the field for you. If you're like that, academia is probably a better place for you or something. I don't know. There are lots of things you can do. But no, you really have to be willing to give and take. I mean, there's a need to do that. And it can't upset you because there's people that I see that don't like the law are people that are just people say something negative about them and it just really bothers them. I mean, and it bothers me too. I don't like it, but it's not going to, I walk away from things. Okay. I mean, you learn to sort of take your wins and losses just like anybody else who's competitive. Okay. I mean, some people can win everything, but most people have to take some losses too. Okay. So you have to be able to do that and see why it's still going to work. Or maybe actually at some point tell your client, we're not going to win this. We have to walk away. But no, it's important and there's a lot there. So yeah, I'd be happy to talk about, because I mean, frankly, we hardly talked. I mean, there are specific products I do offer for my law for my, my technology company. We haven't talked about, and again, I'm not trying to make this an advertising for my company, but each of them is actually they're their own stories about the successes because there have been a whole bunch of failures too. And I could talk about some of those as well. I mean, it's
Oh,
not something I
absolutely.
usually talk about, but some of them didn't work for various reasons. And I don't even know all the reasons. I mean, you don't get a lot of data. You build something, you try it out, right? And then you see what happens. But, it's funny. One of my buddies got an MBA and he handed me his book on pricing. And it is written for people like, product managers at McDonald's or something. Okay. Cause it's all
Mhm.
this stuff about experiment, with this. I'm like, experiment. I'm going to make like 3 sales this month. Okay. I'm not going to like run an experiment each time. I mean, you want to vary things somewhat, but you're going on very little data. And so you really have to get the feedback and figure it out and stuff like that. But yeah, and you have to be trying, but you don't want to, but you don't want to try too many things too. That's its own danger.
Oh, absolutely. And no, we'll have to get you back on for another podcast, Jeffrey, because I mean, again, like there's so much more to digest and to really really uncover more about all the ventures that you are dabbling into and your tech company, your startup. But seriously, man, like,
Yeah,
for the first one, like I really do appreciate your time. And again, I'm gonna
absolutely.
reach back, I'm gonna reach back out to you because I do want you to hop back on the
Okay.
podcast and talk some
Sounds
more.
great. Sounds great.
Well,
Okay.
I love it. I really do appreciate it, Jeffrey. For any other business owners listening to this podcast, if you'd like to share your story, spotlight your company, build some great content for your brand, we'd love to have you on a future episode. Just reach out to us on whatever platform you are seeing us. Thank you everyone again for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode. And thank you as well, Jeffrey.
And you're welcome.